So that little experiment we just did with ourselves, there are some things that I've already listed up here that you guys have noticed. And so one of those is that your personality or your temperament generally remains pretty stable over time. And there's some research to show that your risk taking also goes in line with your temperament over time as you age. Prior experience, if there are big events that are happen throughout your life, that's going to cause you to switch. And then also, just as our brain matures and develops, as those neuronal connections are made, that grows our brain, and it can call upon those previous experiences to help us integrate and make good decisions. At least that's what we hope. And then I talked about infancy, where from all accounts, what we can tell is infants really don't have a sense of this, and they're going to be learning this as they go. So it is so important that we are, as adults, keeping children safe. We want to help them avoid injury and harm. And then if you're running some kind of program, some kind of center or play space, liability is a real thing. You want, first and foremost, you don't want children getting hurt, but secondly, you want to keep running. You want to keep having this space for children to enjoy. And so you've got to think about liability too. And so, it was mentioned about a really anxious parent. And our society has become very anxious, very anxious. And we can't let children wander around the city because they might be abducted, and we can't have them climbing trees because they could fall out and break an arm. And there's lots and lots of regulations on toys and playgrounds and all of that. All of these are very important considerations to be made, but it does feel like the pendulum has swung so far that we're actually eliminating all of these really important kinds of creative and risky play for children with the guise of keeping children safe. Now, the reality is that actually in the United States, there are way more serious injuries from playgrounds than there are from children playing in natural spaces. Now, there are still injuries in natural spaces, and of course, there's extremes on both ends. But the injuries in natural spaces and these risky play spaces that we're talking about tend to be a lot more minor. It's going to be something that could use a Band-Aid or an ice pack, And then on playgrounds, the data shows, it's emergency room data, and it shows that you're going to have a lot more serious fractures and injuries of the sort that are coming from children playing on playgrounds. And so we have to balance these two things. We have to balance the risks of what could happen and the actual hazards of what is more likely or possible to happen that could cause injury and harm. And so, like I said, I feel like we're swinging toward this really risk aversion society of everything's too dangerous, it's too scary because of all the many possibilities. And it's love our murder podcasts and stuff like that. And so those are giving us ideas that things are a lot more risky than they actually are. But risks aren't inherently bad, because what if I had risked $5,000 on Apple stock in 1990? Would that have been a bad risk? No, risk is literally just an opportunity, and it could go either way. It really could go either way. And so when we're thinking about risks, when we're designing spaces for children and working with children, playing with children, we have to think, okay, is this a risk that could go either way so that I need to pay a little more attention to it? Or is there a hazard here? And a hazard is something that's actually going to harm the child. So are there rusty nails that they're going to step on with their bare feet? Is there broken glass? Is there concrete under this playground instead of some kind of softer material that they would fall on and create a bigger injury? And so with the example of the jigsaw, I love this so much because there's a risk here. The risk is losing a finger That's a risk, but it's also an opportunity. And so it sounds like was it your dad or your mom that was helping you? Your dad was helping you with this woodworking, and it sounds like your dad was actually paying a lot of attention to what the possible hazards were and putting in place safety precautions to then reduce that extreme risk of losing a limb, right? And it turned out really well. And so you even mentioned like, oh, maybe that's not a good idea for a 6-year-old to do, but you did it and it was safe. And it's because you had adults around you that were willing to assess the hazards and make it a safe, playful, incredible, thrilling experience for you. We need to help children develop this internal riskometer. These are my own words. It's not a real word. I invented this. Internal riskometer. That's how they can understand their thoughts and feelings and their abilities surrounding a risky play activity. And I pulled this graphic off of a flyer from Boston University, which I love because it's like, instead of just saying, be careful to a kid, which that doesn't really mean much. That's not, that doesn't help me understand what I'm doing and what the risks and benefits are. And so instead, using language with children that's going to help them develop this internal riskometer. And so some of those things are saying phrases like, notice how slippery these rocks are. Notice that this branch is really strong and sturdy. Do you see the poison ivy? Do you see, I had a picture in here earlier of kids at Wonder Bloom using gardening tools. We have to say, like, if they turn around to like look at something and their tools flying around, we have to say like, oh, do you see that your friend is standing right here and your tool is now swinging towards their head? Do you see that? Instead of just saying stop or be careful or don't do that. You can tell them to try moving part of their body or using part of their body in a certain way. Do you feel stable? Do you feel shaky when you're climbing on that? Are you feeling safe or tired or excited or scared? And it's okay to share as adults our own feelings about those things while still giving the children space to feel those things too and not having to be reflected. Like, I'm scared that you're climbing that, so you must be too. No, it's not that way. It's like, oh, I've never climbed something that high. How do you feel? And then helping them problem solve by asking what their plan is. If they're going to climb up the tree, what's their plan once they get up there? What's their plan for how they're going to get down? What can you use? Where will you put things? How will you do something? And who? Is there anyone around you that can also help support you in this risky nature play? So the last thing I wanted to call back to is this tree that my kids and their little friend were climbing. That happens to be a tree in Maui, in Lahaina. And maybe some of you have followed the news, but that tree now looks like this. It's completely charred from the fires that occurred there this August. And when I saw those images in the news suddenly, and I'm doing it right now, I get choked up thinking about this really incredible, gorgeous, over 100-year-old tree that's a cultural landmark for this community that me and my children played in. And suddenly I have a connectedness now. And across all of these benefits that we can think about and intellectualize about with risky play in children, I want to bring it back down to the connectedness. And I really feel like that's the most important part, is the connectedness that we can feel with other people and with the earth around us.